I'm Izzy at Minerva. Today we're continuing our pattern drafting series looking at how to create a pair of elasticated trousers. As you can see in the image next to me, this is what we are aiming for. We are going to start off by using our block that we created in previous videos, and that will be our starting point. Now, the reason why we've chosen to do this particular trouser design is that it's so simple and it's going to fit really nicely as well. It's really simple just to pull on over your hips and off you go. Simple to draft, simple to sew and comfy to wear. What is not to love about that? As usual, you're going to need your standard pattern drafting tools, which are listed next to me right here. So go away and grab those. The block that you're going to see in front of me is going to be my personal block, and your block is going to look different to mine. So don't worry about that. The principles are going to be exactly the same. In case you're wondering, today I'm wearing the Montana midi dress by Style Art Patterns in our Minerva exclusive viscose chalet fabric in the rose relation print. Absolutely beautiful. We've got a sew along for this dress as well. So go and take a look at that on our YouTube channel. Okay, so we have our block in front of us here. This is the back and this is the front. We're going to start off by looking at the front trouser block. All we're going to do with this adaptation is simply make sure that our trousers stay the same width from the hip all the way up to the waist. And basically what that means is that we're going to be able to pull the trousers on over our hips, which is at the widest part of our legs, and then up and over and onto the waist. So it would be nice to work on these two together, so I'm just going to flip them round. If you've not already got this on your block, and you should do, mark on where the hip line is. This one down here is just our crotch line. Okay, working from our hip line, we want to draw a line that runs perpendicular to the hip line and straight up to the waist. Do that on the front and then repeat for the back. At this point, you need to decide what width of elastic you are going to insert into your casing of your trousers. So for me, I'm just going to use 2 centimetre elastic, which is this one here, and we're just going to draw the casing onto the trousers. So you can see this is where we want it to go at the top. If this is the waist, that's the natural waist. Now, if you go to the shops and you buy a pair of trousers, you'll often find that the production block that they use for their trousers has a waistline that is actually dropped by 5 centimetres. So what that means is our natural waist is up here and they drop the waist by 5 centimetres. So they make the trousers stop at this point. They then add the waistband in at that point, and the top of the trousers is 5 centimetres from the waist. You may find that when you draw your own trousers and draft your own trousers, you feel more comfortable with a dropped waist. This is called a low waist in terminology in pattern drafting, and it's usually around 5 centimetres below the natural waistline. For the purpose of this video, however, I am just going to use our natural waist because that's the simplest thing for this block. You can go away and adapt it however you want at home. Okay, so if my elastic is 2 centimetres wide, I want to make the casing just a few millimetres wider than the elastic, just so it fits the width of the elastic in it. So all I'm going to do is to make the casing 2.5 centimetres wide. So draw a line at the top of your waistband, which is 2.5 centimetres offset from the waistline. Do that for the back trouser pattern piece too. Label those pieces just in case. Okay, so we can see the elastic is going to fit in that bit there. Now when we make the casings for the back and for the front, obviously we've got the front of the casing on the front of the trousers on the right side, but we also want to encase that casing to make a complete tube. So all I'm going to do is just to draw a line that is offset from the casing, from the waistband at 2.5 centimetres. Now at this point on the left, we can just extend that line all the way up to create the casing. However, at this point, you'll notice there's a bit of an angle on the top of that here. We're going to ignore that angle, but we're going to start at this point here and just send it all the way up. So the width of the casing is going to match up beautifully with the trouser piece at that point and across to there. Just repeat that whole process for the trouser back pattern piece. Okay, great. Cut out those pattern pieces next. Okay, let's add our seam allowances to our casing. I'm adding a fold line down the centre because that will be the top of the waistband, and that is exactly where the top of it is here at this point. The centre front is going to be placed on the fold. Elasticated trousers, front casing, cut 1 on fold. So with the front casing, we have said this is going to be placed on the fold because we want to duplicate it off of the other front trouser leg. And we've added a seam allowance to the side seam so it can attach onto the back. We've also allocated a fold line along the centre, which runs along the top of the waistband, just as you can see it right there. Okay, and we're just going to cut 1 on the fold. Let's move on to our trousers, adding the seam allowance to the waist as required, and down the sides. Down at the hem, I'm not going to add a seam allowance because this is just a test. I'm just going to draw a straight line across there and continue to add my seam allowance up the inner seam. Okay, I'm just going to add a notch to the trousers where the hip line is on the side seam right there, and another one to the centre front. And also for the knee. All this does is when we're sewing them together, it just helps to sort of show exactly where they should be attaching onto the back pattern pieces. This is the elasticated trouser pattern piece, front trouser, and we're going to cut 2. Now we need to add the grain line for both pattern pieces, and it's going to run perpendicular to the crotch line and the hip line as well, or the knee line. You've got a couple of different references you can use there. And likewise for the casing, just going to run perpendicular to the waistline. Brilliant. So I've shown you how to add your seam allowances to the trouser front leg and the trouser front casing. It's now time to go and do the exact same process for the back using the exact same principles. So let's go and do that, and then we'll come back and we'll cut it out of fabric and sew it together and see what it looks like. And then for our back trouser leg, we've added our seam allowance all the way around the whole thing except for the hem, and our grain line goes straight down running perpendicular to the knee line, and we're going to cut 2 of these pattern pieces. Don't forget to add your notches, then cut that out and cut it out of fabric. We're going to start by sewing the casing together. So we've got the front and we've got the back, and we want to just sew it into a nice big loop all together. So with right sides together, we're just going to pin down both of the short ends. And it's okay that one is shorter than the other, we are expecting that. And then just sew them together. We can then press those seams open at the ironing board, and while we're there, we're then going to fold it with wrong sides together so that it's folded in half lengthways all the way around. Wonderful. Okay, so that's now done, and what we're going to do now is move on to our trouser piece. So I've got my front trouser piece on the screen in front of me, and I'm assuming right side is facing up. I've laid both pieces side by side, kind of flipped over, so I don't make any mistakes with my pinning, which would be very easy to do. I'm going to get my trouser back pattern piece, and with right sides together, just going to lay one over the other so that the crotch seam aligns down here. Repeat for the other 2 pattern pieces so that you know you've definitely got one right leg and one left leg. Great. All we're going to do now is very simply just pin along those side seams. Now, because we've got an elasticated waistband, we can just sew all the way up the side seams and all the way up the inner seam as well. You don't forget you got your lovely little notches to help you along the way. Once you've done the side seam, you can then pin the inner seam as well. Once you've pinned one leg, you may as well pin the other leg and then just sew them up together, hey? Great, we've sewn our 2 trouser legs now. What we're going to do is grab one of them and turn it right side facing out. Once you've turned it right side facing out, we're then going to insert this leg into the other one so that right sides are together and the crotch curve is lining up for both trouser legs. Next, we're just going to pin all the way around that crotch curve, making sure that our front legs are aligning and our back legs are aligning. What we're doing now is pinning that crotch seam which goes all the way in between our legs from the centre front, underneath and back up to the centre back. Now this should match up really nicely. You shouldn't have any problems pinning it in because the pieces are exactly the same, aren't they? Excellent. Once you've done that and you've pinned all of that crotch curve seam in place, we're then just going to sew it. So we have a beautiful pair of trousers here. We've just got our standard leg. We've added in extra volume around the waist up here, and now we need to add the casing to the trousers. You can tell which one is the front in case you got confused because it's the one that is a little bit narrower. Can you see the side seams are sort of coming in? The back is wider than the front, and likewise here as well. So with the right sides together, I'm going to flip over the casing and put the top of the trouser waistband into the casing. Now at this point I want all of my raw edges together. So I'm then going to line up the side seam, which I can see for both of them, and pin through all 3 layers. I'm going to do the same on the other side seam while I've got the side seams available. Perfect, okay. And then just continue pinning all the way around the top of the trousers and the casing, making sure you're pinning all 3 together and the raw edges are aligning nicely. Now at the back, towards one side, I'm going to add a series of double pins. I'm just going to add them about 2 inches apart from each other, 5 centimetres apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start at one set of double pins. I'm going to sew all the way around through all 3 layers and stop at that bit, and that's simply so I can get the elastic into the casing. Okay, we now need to work out the length of elastic that we need. So tap in your waist dimension, your waist circumference, times that by 0.9 and then add 1.5 centimetres. Whatever you have there, that is the amount of elastic that you want to cut. So for me it's 73.5, so I'm just going to measure that out now. Now we're just going to insert the elastic into the casing. So I'm just going to pop one safety pin at the end and one through the other end. I'm going to attach that one to the trouser and then just making sure it's going through nice and flat. I want it going through that way, that's nice and flat. And then we're just going to pop that through the casing and then just keep feeding it all the way through until it gets all the way around to the other side. And just be very careful to make sure that it doesn't twist as you push it through. Wonderful. Once you get it through to the other side, so it's that both ends are through the casing, you can undo the other end. And what we want to do is just make sure that both of the pieces of elastic are running flat all the way through the casing before we sew it together. So just run your fingers round, double check that it's doing what you're expecting it to be doing, that it's not got bunched up anywhere. And then what we're going to do is just pop one over the other at 1.5 centimetres and then just sew along there so that they're both stuck together. I'm going to do that using a zigzag stitch. And there we have it, a nice little zigzag stitch. Okay, so at that point you may want to go and try the trousers on just to check that the elastic and the width of that is looking really good for you. And once you're happy with that, just tuck that elastic in like I've done there and just sew up the remaining open gap. Wonderful. So that is basically it. What you could do if you're finishing off your trousers for real, and this is not just a toile, you'd obviously want to finish off that edge using overlocker or a zigzag stitch and then go and try it on. Oh, it's looking good already, isn't it? Look at that. They look so comfy. This would actually make the perfect pair of pajamas, wouldn't it? Excellent, well done. So these are our elasticated trousers, a really nice, simple, easy fit for an incredibly comfortable pair of trousers. Thank you for joining me today. I've been Izzy at Minerva. It's been great fun to talk you through step by step how to create a pair of elasticated trousers. We've got one more video next week in this series, and we're going to be looking at how to create the fly front on a pair of trousers, which is something very bespoke and specific to trousers. So I'm looking forward to talking you through how to do that next week. In the meantime, if you've got any questions relating to the video or any comments, please feel free to pop them below the video. We always love to hear from our maker community here at Minerva. So thank you for joining me today. I've been Izzy, and I'll see you next time.